The sun was setting on Earth's colonies, far beyond the cradle of humanity, as the first strike hit. No one saw it coming. Humanity had spread its wings, reaching out into the stars, confident in its place in the universe. But in the darkness of space, hidden from sight, the Exorvans, an alien race that had long watched humanity's expansion with envy, decided it was time to strike. The colonies, isolated from Earth and underprepared for such an attack, would be their first target. It began quietly. A lone ship, cloaked in the blackness of space, entered the first colony's orbit. It was nothing special at first, just a flicker of movement in the cold vacuum. But within minutes, a sudden burst of energy exploded from the ship's core, sending waves of electromagnetic radiation toward the colony. The lights blinked out across the station, and the communication systems went dead. The Exorvans had a brutal but effective plan: disable all defenses before anyone could react. And they succeeded. From Earth's perspective, the first warning came in the form of a single frantic transmission. It was weak, full of static, but the message was clear: they're here. We're under attack. They are unstoppable. The signal cut off abruptly, leaving nothing but the silence of space. The officials on Earth could not believe it at first. The colonies were advanced, their defenses equipped with technology far beyond anything Earth had ever used. But the Exorvans had something Earth did not expect: speed, precision, and a brutal strategy. Within hours, the Exorvans struck again. The second colony was hit even harder. No transmission, no warning, just the horrifying sound of alarms blaring through the corridors, followed by an eerie silence. A full assault ships firing, stations crumbling, and people scattered. The Exorvan ships were unlike anything humanity had seen. Agile, deadly, and armed with weapons capable of wiping entire fleets from existence in seconds. Their tactics were swift and ruthless. They had no interest in negotiation, only conquest. Back on Earth, the news spread like wildfire. The government called an emergency meeting, but even they were caught off guard. Earth had always prided itself on its strength, its unity, and the power of its colonies. But now, in the blink of an eye, everything was falling apart. The military was scrambled, commanders were briefed, and preparations began. But it was too late. The Exorvans were already moving toward the third colony, a heavily populated station with millions of people. No one had expected this level of force. The third colony fell within hours. Its massive defense grids were overwhelmed, and even their advanced early warning systems failed to give them enough time. The Exorvans had used a unique tactic, hacking into the station's systems and sending false data. The human commanders on the station believed the attack was a glitch, a mistake, something that would pass. They were wrong. By the time they realized their mistake, the Exorvans had already boarded the station, and their soldiers were everywhere. Earth's reaction was delayed, frantic. The first strike against their colonies, which had been seen as just an isolated event, now turned into a nightmare. Humanity's greatest fear had come true. They were being attacked. Worse yet, it was happening in the farthest reaches of space, where reinforcements would take days, even weeks, to arrive. And in the meantime, the Exorvans were having their way, destroying everything they touched. Back at Earth's command center, high-ranking officials began to panic. Was it a coordinated attack? Were more colonies next in line? Would Earth itself be targeted? The questions flooded in, but answers were few. The military leaders had no choice but to send all available ships to intercept, but the journey would take time, precious time that humanity did not have. The military was stretched thin, trying to respond to a threat they had never even imagined. A few brave souls, still reeling from the shock of the attack, decided to act. They knew they couldn't wait for Earth to respond. They had to do something, anything, to fight back. A group of soldiers and engineers, some with military experience and others with knowledge of the colony's defenses, made their way to a nearby space station. The plan was simple: find a way to send a warning back to Earth and keep the Exorvans from reaching the remaining colonies. The team's leader, Captain Elias Morrow, understood the gravity of their situation. They had no weapons, no reinforcements, and only a slim chance of survival. But they had one advantage: their knowledge of the colonies. Morrow knew that even though they were under attack, there were still ways to fight back. The Exorvans might have taken their defenses, but humanity was resourceful, and that was something the aliens had underestimated. Morrow gathered his crew and laid out the plan. The space station they were on was a hub for communication between colonies, and the team would attempt to access its central core, sending a distress signal back to Earth. It was their only hope. But the station was swarming with Irvan forces. They would have to fight their way through. As they made their way to the core, they encountered Exorvan soldiers who seemed to appear out of nowhere. They were fast, relentless, and deadly. Morrow's team, though smaller, fought with a fury that only humans could muster. Every corner they turned was another fight, but they pushed on, driven by the need to warn Earth, to show the aliens that humanity wasn't just going to roll over. Finally, they reached the communications center, but the room was locked down tight. Zorvans were everywhere, and there was no way to get through unnoticed. It was Morrow's second-in-command, Lieutenant Sarah Blake, who suggested they use the station's emergency power system to override the locks. It was a long shot, but it was their only chance. While Blake worked to bypass the security, Morrow and the others held their ground, taking on wave after wave of Zorvan soldiers. Each moment felt like an eternity, but finally, with a loud click, the doors to the communications center slid open. Blake rushed inside, slamming her hands onto the console. She began typing furiously, entering the emergency broadcast codes, sending out a distress signal. The static was unbearable, but they all knew it would reach Earth. It had to. They had done their part. Now, the fight was in the hands of the planet. They made their way back to the station's airlock. Morrow's heart was heavy. The Exorvans were still in control of the colonies, and Earth would need time to react. Would they be able to rally in time? Or was it already too late? The team, exhausted and battered, could only hope that their message would reach Earth in time to turn the tide. The first strike had been devastating, but it was not the end. Humanity would rise. They had no choice but to fight back, to show the universe that Earth would not go down without a fight. The war for humanity's survival had only just begun. The attack on humanity's colonies had shattered everything Earth had taken for granted. For centuries, the colonies had prospered under the watchful eyes of Earth's military might and strategic alliances. But now, in the span of only a few days, the colonies were falling, one by one, to the relentless onslaught of the Exorvans. It wasn't just a few ships being lost, nor was it an isolated skirmish. It was a full-scale war, one Earth had never anticipated. The colonies had been their lifeblood, and now, with each new colony lost, a piece of humanity's future seemed to slip further from their grasp. Back on Earth, the reaction was swift. The government's first response was one of disbelief. How had they failed to see the threat? How could they have underestimated the Exorvans, who now seemed capable of wiping out humanity's presence in the stars with terrifying ease? As the second colony was destroyed, panic set in. The defense grids were overwhelmed, the fleets shattered. Communications had gone silent, and there were no reinforcements to send. The leaders in the capital had no idea where the next attack would strike, or if Earth itself would be next. The world, for the first time in history, was shaken to its core. In the halls of Earth's government, an emergency council convened. Military officers, diplomats, and strategists sat around the long, polished table, their faces grim and filled with doubt. Earth had always believed it was invulnerable, the strongest force in the galaxy. But now, with each passing hour, that belief was crumbling. The question was not just how to defend Earth, it was whether there was time to defend at all. The military's most powerful ships were scattered across the galaxy, many engaged in futile battles to hold the Exorvans back from the remaining colonies. Some had made it to the front lines, but others were too far, too delayed. Even worse, the Exorvans had learned quickly. They adapted their tactics, making Earth's countermeasures seem ineffective. Amidst the chaos, Earth's military command was scrambling. A general named Samuel Cross, known for his fierce determination and no-nonsense leadership, was given the daunting task of rallying Earth's remaining forces. Cross had fought in many wars, but nothing could have prepared him for this. The Exorvans were unlike any enemy humanity had ever faced. They were not just powerful, they were relentless, surgical, and their technology was far beyond anything Earth had ever encountered. For the first time in his life, Cross felt the weight of doubt press against his chest. Would humanity be able to survive this? Back in the civilian world, there was a different kind of reaction. The people of Earth were stunned, but not defeated. They had always seen themselves as the center of the universe, and now they were being reminded of just how fragile that belief was. Fear spread like wildfire, but so did something else: anger. The people of Earth had always been resourceful, innovative, and unyielding. The Exorvans had made a mistake in attacking their colonies, and Earth's citizens knew it. They would not allow themselves to be wiped out so easily. They had survived wars, disasters, and threats throughout their history. They would survive this too. News spread quickly of the attacks, and across Earth's cities, people rallied. They flooded the streets, not in fear, but in defiance. In the face of destruction, humanity found its resolve. Military training programs were launched at a breakneck speed, and volunteers flocked to join the fight, eager to defend their homes and their families. The factories, once focused on producing consumer goods, now hummed with the creation of weapons and technology designed specifically for war. It wasn't just the military anymore. The entire world was mobilizing. In the military's command centers, Samuel Cross stood over maps that outlined the strategic positions of humanity's last defenses. His mind raced, calculating and recalculating. The first step was to unite the remaining forces and regroup. With the scattered fleets unable to communicate with each other, Cross devised a plan to send out a fleet of small, agile ships to reconnect and bring back some semblance of order. The idea was simple: consolidate what was left of Earth's military and use it to buy time. But the problem wasn't just military strategy. It was the sense of urgency. Earth had only a limited amount of time to act. The Exorvans were growing stronger, and their next target could be Earth itself. The problem was, no one knew where they would strike next. It could be the heart of Earth's defense, or a remote sector. They had to be ready, and fast. The military drafted an emergency response, each branch of the armed forces working around the clock to bolster the planet's defenses. They knew their first strike back would need to be fast, precise, and overwhelming. As the days passed, Earth's leaders worked tirelessly. The once skeptical politicians now stood behind their military, throwing all their resources into the effort. They set aside old differences, knowing that the survival of their species depended on unity. And unity, against the backdrop of such devastation, became a powerful force. Scientists, engineers, and soldiers worked together, creating new technologies, including enhanced shields and energy-based weapons that could potentially pierce the Exorvans' tough defenses. But while Earth's forces were being prepared, the Exorvans were not idle. They were learning from their early encounters, adapting quickly, and refining their tactics. Intelligence reports suggested that the Exorvans had created a new type of ship, one faster and even more powerful than the ones they had used before. It was a terrifying thought that humanity's response could be outpaced, that Earth might not be fast enough to counter the threat. Captain Amelia Sanchez, one of Earth's brightest strategists, was placed in charge of planning the counteroffensive. Amelia was no stranger to warfare, having led several successful missions before, but the scale of this war was beyond anything she had ever experienced. The stakes were higher. Earth had no second chances. Her first priority was to strike at the heart of the Exorvans' operations to attack their command fleet, the central point from which they were coordinating their assault. If Earth could disable their leadership, it might cause the alien forces to falter. But there was a catch. The Exorvans had placed their command fleet in the heart of a heavily fortified asteroid field, a place almost impossible to penetrate. For days, Sanchez worked on the plan, consulting with her team of experts. Each step, each decision, felt like it could be humanity's last. But finally, they had a plan. It was a long shot, but it was their best hope. The key to success lay in stealth and speed. Earth's fleet would make a daring raid, slipping through the asteroid field unnoticed and striking at the Exorvans' command fleet with everything they had. It was a risky move, but it was their only chance to disrupt the Exorvans' hold on the colonies and give Earth a fighting chance. The days dragged on, and tension hung thick in the air. Earth's first true counterattack was finally ready. The military's forces were poised, waiting for the signal to move. As Captain Sanchez looked out across the assembled fleet, she felt a spark of hope, a hope that had long been extinguished by the early devastation. The people of Earth were ready. They had been knocked down, but they weren't out. The Exorvans had made a grave mistake. Humanity was waking up, and this time they would not go quietly into the night. The moment had arrived. Earth's forces were prepared, standing at the brink of a battle that would define the future of humanity. For weeks, they had trained, planned, and adapted. The anger, the fear, and the desperation of the earlier losses were now channeled into determination. The Exorvans had underestimated Earth, and that would be their downfall. The attack on the colonies had brought humanity to the edge, but it also awakened something inside them, a primal drive to survive and reclaim their place in the universe. Captain Emilia Sanchez stood at the helm of Earth's flagship, the Sentinel. She gazed out at the vastness of space, where the final remnants of their fleet had gathered. Her heart pounded in her chest, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of what they were about to do. This was more than a battle. This was humanity's response, their declaration that they would not be driven from the stars. They would fight, and they would fight with everything they had. The Exorvans had invaded their territories, destroyed their colonies, and tested their limits. Now, it was Earth's turn to strike back. "Ready the fleet," Sanchez's voice broke through the silence of the command deck. "All ships in position. Initiate the countdown." On board the Sentinel, every officer moved with precision. The crew was ready. The weapons were powered up. And, most importantly, the element of surprise was on their side. The Exorvans, believing Earth's forces to be disorganized and weak, had no idea that humanity was about to launch a full-scale counteroffensive. The battle plan was simple, but the risks were high. The Earth fleet would break through the asteroid field surrounding the Exorvans' command station and strike at the heart of their operations. If they succeeded, it would cripple the enemy's ability to control their forces and perhaps force them to retreat. If they failed, Earth would lose its last chance to fight back. The moment the countdown reached 0, the Sentinel and the rest of Earth's fleet slipped into motion, their engines burning with an intensity that matched the gravity of the situation. They moved swiftly, weaving through the dense asteroid field with practiced precision, their sensors and shields constantly at the ready. The mission was dangerous, but it was humanity's best chance at turning the tide of the war. Emilia watched the monitors closely as the fleet entered the asteroid field. Each ship was in constant communication, sharing data and adjusting their course to avoid collision. The field was vast, and the Exorvans had laid traps within it, but Earth's engineers had designed a strategy that minimized the risk. Their ships were equipped with advanced cloaking technology, making them nearly invisible to the enemy sensors. It was a delicate balance. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and everything could fall apart. But the stakes were too high. They had to succeed. Hours passed as the fleet advanced deeper into the field. The Exorvans, still unaware of the incoming assault, continued to patrol the outer regions of their command station. Every minute that passed brought Earth's forces closer to their objective, but the tension was unbearable. The silence was deafening as the fleet moved in unison. Then, without warning, the first alert sounded. A ship on the outer edge of the formation had been detected. A ripple of panic surged through the fleet. Had they been discovered? Were the Exorvans finally aware of their approach? "Maintain course," Sanchez commanded, her voice calm, betraying none of the anxiety that gripped her. "Do not engage unless ordered. Keep moving." The crew responded instantly, their training kicking in. The fleet continued on, its engines thrumming softly as it cut through the void. They could not afford to hesitate now, not when they were so close. Minutes later, the fleet broke through the final layer of asteroids. Ahead of them, the Exorvans' command station loomed in the distance, a massive structure surrounded by a ring of ships. Their forces were concentrated, but their attention was focused elsewhere. The time had come. Earth's fleet was poised to strike. "Target the command station," Sanchez ordered. "All ships, prepare to fire on my mark." The first volley of attacks came in quick succession. Laser blasts and missiles streaked across the void, slamming into the Exervan's defenses with explosive force. The enemy ships, taken completely by surprise, scrambled to retaliate, but they were too slow. Earth's fleet had already launched a barrage that ripped through their outer defenses, leaving the Exorvans reeling. Sanchez watched as the explosions lit up the dark expanse of space, a moment of pure chaos. It was a sight to behold, but it was also a reminder of the brutal reality of war. Lives were being lost on both sides, and there would be no turning back now. "We've broken through their outer defenses," said Lieutenant Harris, one of Sanchez's most trusted officers. "Their ships are scrambling to retaliate, but we have the upper hand." Sanchez nodded. "Keep the pressure on. We can't let them regroup." The fleet pressed forward, their weapons firing relentlessly. The Exorvans, despite their superior technology, were disorganized. The surprise attack had thrown them off balance, and now Earth's forces were capitalizing on that advantage. The Exorvans were powerful, yes, but they were not prepared for this kind of all-out assault. As the battle raged on, it became clear that Earth's forces were gaining ground. The Exorvans' command station, once a symbol of their dominance, was now under heavy fire. But the enemy wasn't going down without a fight. Their ships, though disoriented, began to retaliate, launching counterattacks with brutal efficiency. Earth's fleet had the element of surprise, but they couldn't afford to grow complacent. The Exorvans were beginning to regroup, and if they did, the battle could turn in their favor. Amelia Sanchez's heart pounded in her chest as she gave the order to continue the assault. This was humanity's moment to prove they could survive, that they could not be destroyed so easily. The Exorvans had made a fatal mistake by underestimating them, and now they would pay the price. The flagship Sentinel moved in, dodging incoming fire, its weapons blasting through enemy ships with precision. Sanchez watched as one Exorvan ship after another was destroyed, the debris scattering in all directions. But despite their successes, the battle wasn't over. The Exorvans were resilient, and their command station was not yet defeated. Then, something unexpected happened. The Exorvans launched a massive counteroffensive. A wave of ships, larger and more formidable than any they had faced before, emerged from behind the command station. It was a final, desperate attempt to crush Earth's forces. "Brace for impact," Lieutenant Harris shouted, but it was already too late. The enemy ships came in fast, their weapons firing relentlessly. Explosions rocked the fleet, shaking the Sentinel to its core. But Earth's forces were prepared. They fought back with everything they had, pushing the Exorvans back with sheer willpower and the overwhelming force of their counterattack. The battle had reached a fever pitch. For every Earth ship that was destroyed, 2 Exorvan ships were obliterated in return. It was a war of attrition, and Earth had the strength to endure. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the tide of battle began to turn. The Exorvans, exhausted and disorganized, could no longer maintain their resistance. One by one, their ships were destroyed, their command station heavily damaged. The enemy had been broken. As the battle came to a close, a profound silence filled the air. The stars, once the backdrop to the chaos, now seemed distant and peaceful. Earth had won the battle, but at what cost? Hundreds of lives had been lost. Ships had been destroyed. But humanity had shown the galaxy that it would not go quietly. The counterattack had begun, and with it, the first step toward reclaiming their place in the stars. The moment the Exorvans set foot on Earth's colonies, they had made a grave mistake. They thought they could wipe out humanity's presence in the stars. They believed that Earth's forces were fractured, unprepared, and too weak to mount any real resistance. They were wrong. The destruction they had wrought on the colonies had ignited a fire within humanity, one that would burn brighter and fiercer than any enemy could have ever anticipated. Now, humanity was no longer hiding in the shadows, waiting for a chance to strike back. Humanity's fury had been unleashed. On board the flagship Excalibur, Admiral Marcus Cole stood at the command center, staring at the view of space displayed before him. His fingers gripped the armrests of his chair, his knuckles white with tension. The battle for Earth's survival had begun, and this was no longer a fight for territory or resources. It was a fight for existence. The Exervans had come to conquer, to subjugate, but they had underestimated humanity's will to fight. Their unprovoked attack had sparked a new resolve, one that would reshape the course of history. "We're ready, Admiral," said Lieutenant Juno, her voice steady despite the nervous energy in the room. The crew of the Excalibur was prepared, and the fleet had been gathering in the darkness of space, their weapons fully powered. The time to strike back had arrived. Marcus Cole nodded, his gaze unwavering. "Send the signal. It's time to make them feel our fury." The battle strategy was simple, yet deadly. The Earth fleet would strike at the heart of the Exervan forces with everything they had. The Exervans had underestimated humanity's ability to unite in the face of adversity, but now they would experience the consequences of their mistake. The fleet moved in unison, like a swarm of hornets, and the Exervans would feel the sting of their wrath. As the Excalibur and the other ships of Earth's fleet advanced toward the Exervan fleet, the tension in the command center was palpable. The air was thick with anticipation. On the screens before them, the Exervan ships appeared massive, formidable, and deadly, but there was something different in their posture now. They seemed unprepared, as though they hadn't expected a counterattack of this scale. "Admiral, their defenses are not as organized as we thought," Lieutenant Juno reported. "They're reacting slower than expected. It's almost like they didn't expect us to strike this quickly." Cole's lips curled into a tight smile. "Good. Let's show them what happens when they push humanity too far." The first volley of attacks came swiftly. Earth's fleet unleashed a devastating barrage of missiles, lasers, and plasma bolts. The Exervans, caught off guard, scrambled to organize their defenses, but it was too late. The power of Earth's combined forces hit them with the force of a thunderclap. Explosions rippled through the darkness of space as the first Exervan ships disintegrated under the assault. The shockwaves of the blast sent ripples across the battlefield, and the Earth fleet pushed forward relentlessly, each ship in perfect formation. As the Excalibur surged through the void, Cole could feel the power of the ship beneath him. It wasn't just technology that made this battle so fierce, it was the rage that fueled it. Humanity's fury had been a long time coming, and now it was being unleashed with a vengeance. "We're breaking through their lines, Admiral," said Lieutenant Juno, her eyes scanning the readings on the monitors. "Their ships are falling back, but they're regrouping for a counteroffensive." "Let them," Cole replied, his voice cold. "Let them come. We'll show them why it was a mistake to attack our colonies." The Exervans, despite their technological superiority, were faltering. They had expected to crush humanity, to make an example of them, but instead they were finding themselves pushed back at every turn. Their attempts at retaliating were ineffective. The Earth fleet, united and focused, tore through their defenses, one ship after another falling to humanity's wrath. Every blast was a reminder of the colonies that had been destroyed, the families that had been lost, and the lives that had been stolen by the Exervans' cruelty. And with every enemy ship destroyed, humanity's resolve grew stronger. As the battle raged on, Admiral Cole could see the Exervans' forces beginning to fracture. Their once imposing formation had broken apart, their ships now scrambling to hold off the Earth fleet. The tide of the battle was shifting, and Cole knew that this was only the beginning. The Exervans may have made the first strike, but humanity was about to make the last. Just as the Earth fleet was about to launch its final push toward the Exervans' command ship, an unexpected surprise came from behind. A new wave of enemy reinforcements arrived, emerging from a previously hidden sector of the battlefield. A massive Zorvan warship, larger than anything they had encountered before, appeared, flanked by a fleet of smaller ships. It was a daunting sight, and for a moment, the Earth fleet hesitated. Could they handle this new threat? "Admiral, we're outnumbered," Lieutenant Juno said, her voice tense. "That warship is far more powerful than we anticipated." Cole's eyes narrowed, and a slow smile spread across his face. "We've been waiting for this." Without hesitation, he gave the order. "All ships, target that warship. Focus all firepower on it." The Excalibur and the rest of the fleet locked onto the massive warship. The battle had become a race against time. The Exorvans' reinforcements were coming in fast, but Earth's fury was a force of nature. They would not let the Exorvans escape justice for their attacks. The first blast hit the warship with an earth-shattering explosion, sending a shockwave through the battlefield. The Exorvans retaliated, firing back with a volley of missiles, but Earth ships were prepared. The Excalibur dodged and weaved, its shields absorbing the impact of incoming fire. "Hold steady," Cole barked. "Focus everything on their engines. Take them down." The battle became a blur of explosions and fire. The Earth fleet surged forward with renewed vigor, determined to finish what they had started. As the massive warship fired one last desperate shot, a volley from the Excalibur slammed into its core. The ship's shields flickered and failed, and within seconds, the warship erupted into a fiery explosion that lit up the sky. The shockwave rippled outward, throwing smaller ships off course. "We did it," Juno breathed, her eyes wide with disbelief. The Exorvans' most formidable weapon had been destroyed, and with it, their last hope for victory. But Cole wasn't done yet. He knew the Exorvans would regroup, try again. They weren't beaten, not yet. "Keep up the pressure," he commanded. "We finish this now." And finish it, they did. One by one, the remaining Zorvan ships fell, their firepower no match for the relentless fury of humanity's counterattack. The Exorvans, once so confident in their superiority, now found themselves in retreat. Earth's fleet had shattered their forces, leaving them scrambling to escape. As the dust settled and the stars once again filled the void, Admiral Marcus Cole allowed himself a moment to breathe. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. The fury of humanity had been unleashed, and this was only the beginning. The Exorvans had learned a hard lesson: never underestimate the resolve of a species fighting for survival. The silence in space was deafening. For days, the Earth fleet had fought their way through the outer sectors of the galaxy, each battle harder than the last, but always pushing forward. Admiral Marcus Cole stood at the command center of the Excalibur, his eyes scanning the holographic maps. His crew was exhausted, their bodies and minds stretched to their limits. Yet they were close. The final battle, the one that would decide the fate of humanity, loomed ahead. The Exorvans had underestimated humanity's resilience from the very beginning. When they launched their attack on Earth's colonies, they thought they could break humanity's spirit. But they had only fueled a fire that burned hotter with each passing day. Now, Earth's fleet stood on the edge of the Exorvans' home system, ready to strike at the heart of the enemy's empire. There was no going back. This would either be humanity's triumph or their final stand. "Admiral, we've confirmed the location of their command ship," Lieutenant Juno reported, her voice tense but clear. "It's in the heart of their capital system. The Exorvans are waiting for us." Cole nodded, his jaw set with determination. He had led his fleet through countless battles, each one harder than the last. But this was different. This was the endgame. The Exorvans had their strongest forces stationed in their capital system, and they weren't about to make the same mistake they had made before. They had underestimated Earth once, and now they would pay the price. "Prepare the fleet." "We move out in 15 minutes, Cole ordered, his voice cold and precise. "This ends today." As the fleet moved into position, the tension in the command center reached its peak. Each officer and crew member was on edge, knowing that the next few hours would decide the fate of humanity. The crew of the Excalibur had become more than just a team. They were a family, bound by the same desire to protect their home. But even family members could feel the weight of the moment. This battle would be the hardest of their lives. The massive form of the Exorvan command ship appeared on their screens, dwarfed by the smaller ships surrounding it. It was a behemoth, a fortress of metal and energy that could destroy entire fleets in seconds. The Earth fleet had faced many enemies, but none like this. The Exorvans had no intention of surrendering, no desire to negotiate. They had come to crush humanity. And now, humanity was coming for them. Cole's fingers hovered over the command panel, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew the risks. The Excalibur was powerful, but the Exorvans had more ships, more firepower. This wasn't just about winning, it was about surviving. If they failed here, Earth would be lost. But Cole wasn't the kind of man to back down. Not now, not ever. The Exorvans had crossed a line, and there would be no retreat, no mercy. It was time to end this. All ships, lock onto their command ship, Cole said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. We strike fast. We strike hard. No hesitation. The Excalibur led the charge, its engines roaring to life as it surged forward, cutting through the cold void of space. The rest of the fleet followed in perfect formation, their weapons primed and ready. The battle had begun. The first volley of fire from the Earth fleet hit the Exorvan ships with explosive force. Missiles, plasma bolts, and laser beams ripped through space, tearing apart the enemy ships one by one. The Exorvans retaliated with equal ferocity, launching a barrage of their own, but the Earth fleet was ready. They dodged, they weaved, and they fought with a desperation that only comes when survival is on the line. As the battle raged on, Cole's focus never wavered. He could see the devastation on both sides, the Exorvans losing ships, the Earth fleet sustaining heavy damage. The Excalibur rocked with the impact of enemy fire, but its shields held strong. The crew pushed forward, refusing to back down. This was their moment. This was humanity's moment. Lieutenant Juno's voice came through the comms, breaking through the chaos. Admiral, their command ship is charging up its main cannon. They're going to fire. It's aimed right at us. Cole's heart skipped a beat. The Exorvans had been saving their most powerful weapon for this moment. If they hit the Excalibur, it would be over. The fleet would be shattered, and the battle would be lost. But Cole didn't panic. He had fought in enough battles to know that panic was a luxury they couldn't afford. Evasive maneuvers, now, he ordered. The Excalibur veered sharply, its engines flaring as it dodged the incoming blast. The energy beam from the Exorvan command ship missed by mere inches, but it was enough to cause a shockwave that rattled the fleet. The blast illuminated the darkness of space, casting an eerie glow on the battlefield. But they had survived. For now. We've got them on the ropes, Cole said, his voice tight with determination. Press the attack. We end this today. The Earth fleet launched a final assault, focusing all their firepower on the Exorvan command ship. They knew that this was their one chance. The Exorvan's weapons were powerful, but they were no match for the sheer will and fury of humanity. Every shot from the Earth fleet was a message: you will not defeat us. As the battle continued, the Exorvans began to falter. Their command ship was heavily damaged, its once imposing form now listing to one side. The rest of their fleet was disorganized, their ships scattered and retreating. The Excalibur and the rest of the Earth fleet pushed forward, determined to finish what they had started. Then, with a final, resounding blast, the Exorvan command ship exploded. The shockwave sent debris flying in all directions, and the remaining Exorvan ships were torn apart in the wake of the explosion. The battle was over. Humanity had won. Admiral Cole stood in silence, watching the battlefield. The Earth fleet had emerged victorious, but the cost had been high. The battle had taken everything they had, and the scars of war would remain. But Earth had survived. Humanity had survived. And in that moment, Cole knew that they had proven something that the Exorvans would never forget. They had made a mistake. And now they would pay the price. "Report," Cole said, his voice hoarse from the tension. "We've won, Admiral," Lieutenant Juno said, her voice filled with awe. "The Exorvans are retreating. We've destroyed their command ship. It's over." Cole nodded, but his eyes remained fixed on the empty space where the Exorvan fleet had once been. The battle was over, but the war had changed humanity forever. The fury that had been unleashed would not be forgotten. This was just the beginning. Humanity had awakened, and nothing would ever be the same again.